Hi, this is my autobiography by Natasha Mendoza for Issues in Child Maltreatment with Tammy Gorski. We'll start at the beginning. I was born to a 16-year-old mother. She was single when I was born. We lived with my grandparents, so my mom's parents lived with them. We were living in Kansas while my father was actually living up in Wisconsin. So for about the first year of my life, it was just me and my mom. So she was a single mother then. They have both told me multiple times that like the biggest reason that they did get married was because they had me, so they felt like they needed to get married. My mom actually had somebody else ask her to marry him before my dad did, and she decided to go with my dad because I was born already. So those are a few risk factors right there. The single mother, the getting married only because they had a child together. So growing up, between 5 and 6 years old, there was a lot of fighting that I remember. Um, there was physical and emotional, like verbal fighting that sticks out in my mind a lot since I was little between my parents. There was this one incident. We were living in Milwaukee, and my aunt was over at our house, and it was me and my two other siblings, and my mom and dad were screaming at each other for something, and then there was a pizza on the table, and they started throwing hot pizza at each other around the house. I remember there was just pizza all over the walls, and I was terrified. I didn't know what was going on, but my aunt brought me and my siblings outside and took us to ice cream so that we didn't have to be in the house when that was happening. But there's multiple times that I just remember having to leave or shut ourselves in the bedroom because there was fighting between mom and dad. And there was three of us siblings at this time already. When my mom was 21 years old, she had three kids. She was a stay-at-home mom. My dad worked all the time. So at 10 years old, um, between 8 and 10, I can't remember exactly when, but we were living in Wausau, and I remember going to one of my friend's house. Her name was Samantha. We called her Sam. I remember big curly red hair that she had. I went over to her house one time, and she told me that her mom was never home, that she was working all the time, all evening and all night long. I remember she telling me that she was at home by herself all the time at 8 or 9 years old. And so I went into her house, and I remember just this overwhelming smell of urine and feces, just the entire apartment. That's what it smelled like. Like human and cat. I remember that. You looked around the apartment and there was not a spot on the floor that you could see the actual floor. It was just garbage and mess all around. Um, and I remember thinking, this isn't okay. What's going on with my friend? She never opened up about it. All she said was that we had to hurry up and go up to her apartment because she had to grab something. But then I do remember about a week after I went up to her house, all of a sudden her and her mom just disappeared and moved away, and we never heard from her or about her ever again. So I don't know if that's anything. Oops. So when I was 13, well, we'll start at 12. This was my best friend. Her name was Trisha. And I remember when I was about 12 years old, I was over at her house. This is when we were living up here in Abbotsford. This is where I grew up most of my life. I was over at her house, and I remember she had mentioned, another friend had mentioned that Trisha had told them that her mom would hit her. And I would just, I was just okay, maybe she was naughty, so she got hit once or twice. But when I was over at her house, when we got closer, as friends, We were standing in the kitchen washing dishes. Her mom was in the living room, and Trisha was drying the dishes, and one dish slipped out of her hand, fell to the floor, and broke. And I thought nothing of it, so I was going to walk and get the broom and start sweeping it up. And all of a sudden, her mom gets up off the couch, starts yelling and screaming at Trisha like crazy, and then she grabbed her by the hair and she threw her on the living room floor and started punching her and then kicking her in the stomach. And I was just standing there. I did not know what to do. I was froze. And Trisha was just laying there while her mom was kicking her. And then after, I don't know, 2 or 3 minutes, her mom stopped, went back into the living room, sat back down like nothing happened. So when I finally became unfroze, I grabbed the phone and I called the police. And so the police came, talked to her mom for a few minutes while me and Trisha were standing outside. Like, Trisha begged me not to call the police. And I said, I am not going to not call the police after what I just saw. Uh, so after the police talked to her mom for a little bit, he left. We came back in. Nothing happened. She wasn't arrested. Nothing. Uh, and then I remember that I was not allowed to go over to Trisha or talk to Trisha for the next 3 or 4 months because her mom was mad that I called the police on her. She told me that after those few months, in order for me to talk to Trisha anymore, I had to apologize to her mom for calling the police on her. And then, let's see, I'll go to the next one. These were my teenage years. I was becoming sexually active when I was friends with Trisha. We would go out on the weekends and we would drink with random guys and smoke cigarettes and walk around town and stuff. Not very good decisions. But one thing at 13 was a guy that I was engaging in sexual activity with. He had told me that he was 18 years old. Mind you, I was 13, but 18 years old was, I didn't think nothing of it. It was just a few year difference. And Trisha was doing the same thing with guys who were older, like a lot older than 18. But the school staff had heard of a rumor that was going around my my middle school then, and about me sleeping with people. So I got called into the office and I had to talk to the guidance counselor about it. And at first I was scared. I said, no, like, what are you talking about? But then she kept asking me, I need to tell the truth and stuff. So I told her, yeah. And so she called the police and my mom. And my mom came into the room with me when the police were there. And I had to point to the parts of the body on that piece of paper with a girl and a guy picture drawn on it, indicating that we had engaged in intercourse. And so, that was it until a few months later, where I was subpoenaed to court and I had to sit in the courtroom across from that guy, and I had to testify. And come to find out, he was 27 years old. So, needless to say, he was in jail for a while because there was 2 other girls who were even younger than I was that he had been charged with raping. But I think a lot of the things that I was doing when I was acting out when I was 13 was my youngest sister. She was born when I was 10. Had always had mental issues. She has been diagnosed with ODD, with ADD, anxiety, and depression. With her ODD, she has always acted out. She's always had thrown fits. She has taken the attention of my parents away from the rest of us. It always felt like. So I felt like I didn't have that attention that I needed. My mom was always a stay-at-home mom, and my dad was always working. So he worked second shift, so we never saw my dad. And then my mom has always suffered from depression and anxiety. But around the time that my sister was, I want to say like 2 or 3, my mom was also diagnosed with bipolar disorder, which we later found out she was misdiagnosed with bipolar, and she is actually borderline personality disorder is what she has been diagnosed with recently. So those are, I don't know, I feel like that kind of had something to do with my acting out for attention or something. I don't know. But when I was 14, I had asked my mom if I could go on birth control because Trisha had asked her mom if she could go on birth control, and her mom put her on birth control. So I thought, to be safe, I didn't want nothing happening, so I talked to my mom about going on birth control, and my mom said absolutely not. She said if I put you on birth control, that is consenting to you to have sex, so I will not allow you to have sex, so you're not going on birth control. Well, about 3 or 4 months after she told me that, I found out I was pregnant at 14. Her father, my daughter's biological father, disappeared when we found out I was pregnant. He told me that he went to Texas to work to save money for the baby. He was 17 when I was 14. He had family in Texas and stuff, so that's why I believed him. And when my daughter was 3 months old, he showed back up at my parents' house, but he was never really around for us. I mean, I was going to high school full time. At 15, I was a single mom. I worked part-time at Subway, actually. This one, that's me, 8 months pregnant in the back with my siblings. I was working at Subway part-time. My daughter went to daycare. Her father was literally never around. He was only around when it was convenient for him to be around. He didn't pay child support, like nothing like that. But when she was about 2 years old, her dad and I wanted to try to make it work out between us. When I was 16, 17, I just wanted my family. I wanted that perfect little family with a baby and the mom and the dad together happily ever after. Well, he was still never around. I moved in with him. Like, we weren't actually like moved in. My mom didn't allow us to leave until I was 18. But I slept there all the time with my daughter. And that's when the physical abuse had started. He would be gone all night long, and I'd ask him simply where he had been, and he didn't like me asking him. So he started hitting me and kicking me, and my daughter at 2 or 3 years old was just standing there watching me and screaming and crying for me. That is like the worst memory that I have. I still see her face and everything when that was happening. A few months into staying there, I was at school and my daughter was at daycare, and I got a call from his brother saying that he was in jail. So I went to the house, and it was turned like literally upside down, and I had found out that he had been selling drugs for the past 2 years, and I had no idea about it. That's where he had been those nights that he wasn't home, and the times he wouldn't answer his call, he was selling and doing drugs. He had actually sold to an undercover police, so they raided his home and arrested him. So we visited him in jail for a few months until he got deported back to Mexico. I was 18 when he was deported. And at that time when that was happening, when he got deported, my mom and dad started going through a legal separation process. And she would stay overnight at friends' houses and never really knew where my mom was. Like, we didn't know what was going on with her. She wasn't ever home. She and I had always been super close, especially when I got pregnant. Like, we got really close. She was my number one, like, supporter. We started fighting a lot, though, when all this started happening. So 2 months after my daughter's dad was deported, I bought plane tickets and we went down there for a few months.